हेलो एंड अस्सलाम वालेकुम, वेलकम टू दिस कोर वन विद आर्यन हुसैन। आज हमारे साथ बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग गेस्ट हैं। कुछ अर्से पहले इनसे मुलाकात हुई एंड जिस तरह से हर किसी का कोई ना कोई एक्सपीरियंस होता है, इनका तजर्बा भी बड़ा अच्छा रहा और इनसे जो बातें मुझे इल्म में आई मेरे, तो मुझे कुछ एहसास हुआ कि मैं अपने ही मुल्क के अंदर ना थोड़ा सा गेस्ट टाइप का होकर रह गया था, क्योंकि जो चीज़ें मुझे बता रही थी हमारे अपने मुल्क के बारे में, लेकिन ऑब्वियसली हर एक का अपना पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू होता है। तो ये जिस बैकग्राउंड से आई और जो पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू इन्होंने ऑब्ज़र्व किया यहाँ पे, तो आइए आज आपसे वो शेयर करते हैं। मेरी बहुत ही अच्छी दोस्त और हमारे बहुत प्यारी मेहमान ज़िनिया जमशेद हमारे साथ आज मौजूद हैं। थैंक यू फॉर कमिंग ज़िनिया।
थैंक यू,
बहुत शुक्रिया आपके आने का। तो टेल अस समथिंग अबाउट यू, कि ये जो आपके एक्सपीरियंसेस हैं, आई अंडरस्टैंड दैट कि आप कोई 10 साल पहले यहाँ आई यहाँ पे।
10 साल होने वाले हैं अगस्त।
Almost 10 years.
Yeah,
Almost a
almost
decade
10
now.
years. Yeah, almost 10 years.
How it has been?
It's been very interesting. ज़िंदगी की में हर चीज़ जिस तरह होती है उसमें कुछ अप्स थे, कुछ डाउन्स थे। Mostly up, I'd like to say I'm very glad कि मैं इधर कनाडा में हूँ as opposed to anywhere else. But it's been an interesting 10 years.
What made you come to Canada? पहले तो ये बताओ।
Um,
Because you came from Pakistan,
I
you have
came
the
from
whole world
Pakistan.
open to you.
Yes,
Why
yeah.
Canada?
Well, I got admission in a very interesting program. It was top notch. One of the very few universities in the world offered it. My parents were very supportive. उन्होंने मुझे कहा था तुम्हें जहाँ जाना है तुम चली जाओ. So मैं यहाँ पढ़ने आई थी UFT St. George में. I came to study here just to study, I think. Yeah, मेरा plan यही था कि मैं बस 4 years पढ़ूंगी and then I'll just go home. And that's it.
और फिर यहाँ के कनाडा इतना अच्छा लगा, didn't want to go
इधर ही रह
back.
गई. Yeah, I think that's exactly what happened.
ज़्यादातर इमिग्रेंट्स के साथ यही होता है।
Exactly.
वो यहाँ पे आते हैं और यहीं के होके रह जाते हैं। Such a beautiful place.
Yeah.
So what inspired? So I believe you wrote this book, right? इसका नाम आपने क्या रखा है जी? From दूध पत्ती to coffee. Okay, that's very interesting. So do you like दूध पत्ती or coffee at all?
I love दूध पत्ती. I love दूध पत्ती and I love double double. So
अच्छा?
I think that's a good summary of who I am. I'm an immigrant in Canada and I love both aspects of my life.
So what made you write this book?
Well,
लिखी कब आपने बुक की? पहले तो ये बताओ मुझे।
ये मैंने लिखी थी when I wrote this 2 years ago actually.
अच्छा।
I was expecting my first child and I was about to go on mat leave and I think I've always been the type of person who has trouble not doing anything.
Right.
तो मुझे इस ख्याल से वहशत हो रही थी कि मैं 1 साल बगैर जॉब के और बगैर कुछ करे मैं क्या करूँगी, which is stupid because anyone who's had a baby will tell you it's the hardest job and you have no time to yourself. So I think I kind of dug myself into a hole when I said I'm going to write this book before the baby comes, which I did. I wrote the first manuscript before the baby came and then I started editing it, I started putting it together and I self-published it while I was on mat leave. So I wrote this book because
what inspired you?
I think my own story and the fact that there's nothing in the market like it. So I came here as an international student and like all international students will tell you, it's a very interesting journey. It's difficult. It's kind of, what you're going through is your phases of culture shock. So you have your ups and your downs and nobody tells you how difficult your life gets, you know. Everyone will tell you, you know, yeah, it's hard. The winters are hard. The food it'll take some time for you to get used to. Studying is going to be difficult because you're going from a British curriculum, ONA levels in Pakistan, to a North American system, semester based, where you have, you know, experience based learning and exams are different. But nobody tells you how difficult it is emotionally to get used to a new home because you've never been exposed to that.
Right.
You know, my parents, my grandparents migrated from India before the partition, both sets of my grandparents. So I had heard their stories कि, you know, एक दिन सोए इंडिया में थे, उठे पाकिस्तान में.
Right.
So we had to leave everything, get on a train, go to Pakistan. And you listen to those stories and you're like, yeah, that's hard.
Right.
You know, and alhamdulillah, I can never imagine what that must be like.
Right.
You know, so my immigration story is so different because I came from a very privileged background. Money was not an issue like it was for my grandparents. Possessions were never an issue because I never had to leave everything and move because I was
two different situations.
It was a completely different situation.
It was forced upon them and it was by choice coming to Canada.
Exactly. But I think in that, nobody told me how difficult it would be emotionally. To understand that I'm leaving Pakistan behind. Everything I know I'm leaving behind and I'm coming to this new country and this is my new home.
What was the inspiration to come to Canada then?
Just to study.
Just to study.
Just to study, yeah.
Right.
I
So
only
you
came
were
here to
not
study.
ready when you were coming here
No.
emotionally. So what did you think when you land in Canada? What would
Yeah.
happen to you?
I thought it'd be like Mean Girls or like any other North American movie. You know, you
Right.
see these kids, you know, in hallways, jaan lockers lage hue hain, and you
Right.
go to classes where the teachers are cool and they sit on the table. I
Right.
thought that's how life would be. You know,
Okay.
I'd eat a cheeseburger whenever I wanted. There were no parents to tell me what to do. You know,
Right.
it's a lot harder. If
So
we're
it wasn't like this when you came
it's-
here?
No, it's all of a sudden you have to manage your own finances, which I think is a quick crash course in reality,
Okay.
right? Every month you're getting X amount of dollars. You
Right.
got to figure out your clothing. You got to figure out your food. You got to figure out your textbooks.
Right.
Right there is a reality check in, you know what? You're an adult now. You got to make tough choices.
But when you're leaving a country and you're taking such a big decision, like you're going overseas, and you know, like you're going so far away from your parents, and knowing that you're going, so aren't you ready already? Like, you know what, I'm going to go there and I'm going to be managing all these things.
For sure, yeah. I think, and I think for the
But
first
you just
few
don't
months,
realize it?
You don't realize it until it hits you.
Okay.
You know, the first few months are fine. You're managing everything properly, but as the time goes on,
Right.
and you start getting homesick,
Right.
you realize that on top of everything else, how much you took for granted. Right?
Right.
Yeah, you took maa ka khana for granted. Yeah, you took, you know, you never had to deal with, you never had to deal with real situations like, do I have dinner tonight or should I just wait and then have a good lunch tomorrow? You know,
okay.
Those are never questions.
So that's
that
like
you,
a financial crunch.
Absolutely, yeah, and those are
Right.
never questions that you actually consider
Right.
when you're like, yeah, okay, I'll have $2,000 a month. You know, I
Right.
can figure it out. That's a lot of money. It
Right.
seems like a lot of money, but when you're living in Toronto, when you have to figure out, you have to buy a new textbook because you have to do it. Your professor told you you have
Right.
to do it.
Right.
You have to figure out that, you know, when it comes down to it, when it comes down to those decisions, it's a lot harder than it actually seems.
So what was the first thing you really loved when you arrived in Canada? You're like, okay, I'm in Canada. What am I loving?
I love the weather. I think.
You love the weather.
I came in September.
You came in September,
and
okay.
I came from Lahore, so
Right.
you know this is right after monsoon.
Right.
It's mid to late 30s in
Right.
Pakistan, almost
Yeah.
40s. When I came here, it was 25 degrees. I was almost cold.
Right.
For the first week, I just wore a sweater and I sent my
Right.
parents pictures. I'm like, it's so cold here.
And 25.
And yeah, it was 25 degrees, which is
Right.
beautiful weather. I think I
Right.
love the weather. I love the fact that I think I love the freedom. I'd never experienced anything like
Let's
it.
talk freedom. What kind of freedom you got here, which you didn't have back home?
I think it's more of a mental freedom, you know.
Okay.
It's not to say my parents never allowed me to go anywhere. The fact
Right.
that I'm here is a
They
case.
allowed you to come, right.
It's a case in point. They just put me on a flight and they said, you know, see you next year.
Right.
See you for the summer. But I think it's just it's liberating to think that I could, you know, go out of my dorm room at 2 a.m. and
Right.
go grab a sandwich
Right.
across the street.
Okay.
You know, that's a different kind of liberation.
Right.
That from someone who's kind of been not sheltered, but someone who's been in Pakistan as a high school student, you don't get to have that kind of liberties.
Right.
You know,
And then there's always a price to pay for everything, right?
Absolutely.
So what was the price you paid for this liberty?
Okay, so the price I
The
paid.
first thing you hated, right after the first thing you loved. You're like, where the hell am I?
Yeah, so I think what I didn't know it at that time was I was going through a phase of culture shock.
All right.
And that's what I kind of talk about in my book as well, is जब आप यहाँ पे, and that's universal for any new immigrant. When you're going to go to a new country, you're going to go through something called culture shock.
Right.
And every university, every agency, even the government has a pamphlet on culture shock, right? And it's kind of like, okay, you're going to be shocked by certain aspects of their culture.
Right.
Why do people dress the way they do?
Right.
Why do people talk the way they do? But when I was doing research for this book and through my own experience, culture shock was really a series of 4 stages of my life.
And you have explained that in your book.
I've explained that in the
so
book.
what is that?
So
That's
the
interesting.
first stage, and that culture shock, you need to understand, is in a U-shaped graph. Okay?
But before we go into that, I want to ask you something I read here. There's a thing here that says, what is Canada?
Yeah.
So what is Canada? I want to know my country.
Yeah.
Tell me, what is Canada?
Canada is a collection of identities.
Okay.
Canada is a collection of experiences.
All right.
And Canada is the ability for you to be who you want when you want to be.
So that's Canada to you.
That's Canada to me.
All right. So
for example, I wore this kurti to work today.
right.
I work in a corporate office where the
Right.
dress code is casual.
Right.
A lot of people asked me, they said, what shop did you get it from? I said, I got it from Pakistan. I've
Right.
always had it, you know. For me to be able to wear this to work
Yeah.
and for me to be celebrated for it,
Yeah.
I think that's Canada.
But you know, that's usually in a metropolitan cities where we are
Yeah.
more open. But
Yeah.
when we go to the outskirts, it kind of become difficult.
Absolutely, but I've worn this everywhere.
Right.
I was in, I can't even remember the town. Last week I was driving through it and I went out and a few people asked me the same question.
Right.
Where did you get that top?
Right.
That's amazing.
Right.
You know, for me, Canada is being able to go out at 10 at night, going to Taza Taste and picking up nihari.
Right.
You know, I can't do that.
Right.
I don't think I can do that.
There's a security factor.
If there's
safety
security,
factor?
it's the fact that as an immigrant, your journey will not be compromised. You can assimilate completely to Canada,
Right.
or you can assimilate at your own pace.
Right.
You know, because not everyone wants to assimilate to Canada, and that's okay.
Right.
You know, it's not a melting pot.
But this sounds like a fairy tale. So where does the problem come in then?
I think the
So
problem
we go
comes
back to
in-
your
Yeah.
chart here. So where
Yeah.
does the problem? Because this is just perfect. Everything sounds amazing, right?
Because what I am trying to say here is that Canada provides that framework,
Right.
and the ability to provide that framework to you do you whenever you want
Right.
is perfect.
Right.
There's no question about it.
Right.
That kind of accommodation, it really doesn't exist in a
Right.
lot of countries in the world, and I think that's what a lot of people say when they what they mean when they say the world needs more Canada.
Right.
Right? That's a tagline these days. What does
Right.
it mean? It means that you need to be accommodating enough to other people's battles and to other people's struggles, because everyone's going through that.
Right.
And I think the problem, now going back to my chart,
Yeah.
is coming to that. Is that for an immigrant, the problem begins when you arrive to a new country.
All right.
Everything is perfect, you know?
Right.
You come into this new country, you're overwhelmed by this new freedom you have, you're overwhelmed by like in my case, the weather, you're overwhelmed by your new freedom, everything is perfect, right? But as you stay here day in and day out, you start realizing that you're going through an emotional turmoil. You miss your home country. You don't like certain aspects of this country. I didn't like the food in the beginning. I didn't like how people were so aloof. You know, I come from a culture where everyone is intervened in everyone's lives.
Yes.
You know, every evening most evenings aren't spent at home. Most evenings are spent at other people's houses socializing.
Right.
You know, if I didn't go to my parents' house, I'd be at my grandparents' house, and I didn't need to call ahead. You know, here everything was proper, everything was structured,
Right.
and it's very different from what I'm used to.
Right.
And I started disliking that. I'm like, why do people need to put up these walls?
Right.
What I needed to understand is that this is how this country works. This is
Exactly.
how these people work. This is how this framework is developed, you know? So, and that's the second part of your culture shock. So after honeymoon, you're going into something called the disorientation phase.
That's why you're realizing the facts.
The facts of life, yeah.
Okay.
That's when you're realizing, you know,
There's a cost to all this.
There's a cost to all this. And I think what most people don't realize is that the cost is emotional.
Right.
You know,
More than financial.
More than financial. Yeah, the financial's there.
It's there,
As
yeah.
an immigrant, the financial are always there.
Right.
You're always converting dollars to rupees. You're
Right.
always calculating, can I really afford a 200 rupee ki chai?
Right.
You know, you're
Right.
always contemplating that. But I think compounding that issue makes it a mental and makes it a psychological thing.
Okay.
And that's the price you're paying.
All right.
You know, and that phase, that 2-3 month phase of disorientation is really difficult.
So what do you really face in that time? Like what are the challenges, let's say the first quarter when you're here?
So I think, and I can tell you from my example, because my disorientation phase was when I was a first year university student in Toronto. For me, I'll give you a snapshot of what that looked like. It looked like tests that I was getting D's on because
Okay.
I didn't understand how the system worked. It was financially, I didn't have a lot of disposable income. All my income was already allotted to certain things.
Right.
Right? And that also meant I was depressed because I was homesick. I was, I missed everything about my home. I disliked everything about here. I'm used
So where
to
did all the excitement go then?
That's just part of the process.
So what is a bubble? It just came in and it was gone?
It comes and then it starts to go. You know, it's choti choti cheezein which you kind of push to the side. For
Right.
example, for me, I wear kursas everywhere. I love kursas. Anyone who knows me, I love kursas. I have 20 in my closet right now. I used to wear kursas everywhere. I couldn't wear kursas here, right?
If you can wear a kurti, why not kursas? What's the difference?
Well, it's November, it's snowing. I can't wear. I couldn't wear kursas in the winter. Over there in Pakistan, I could wear kursas, right? That's a small thing. It's negligible. But add that to a list of ever-growing resentments, and they start building up. Right? I can't wear kursas here. I can't talk in Urdu over here. And as an immigrant, you're thinking in your native language. I used to think in Urdu.
Absolutely, that's how it works.
That's how it works. मैं उर्दू में सोचती थी, but all the conversations you're having, all the teaching that's happening, it's all in English, and it's in Canadian English, and it's fast, right? So in order to keep up, you automatically start falling behind.
So for your first quarter, you're converting rupees to dollar and translating Urdu to English.
Yeah.
So that's your first quarter.
That's your first quarter, right? Or the thing with me was I was living. I think that was a good thing. My roommate was also an immigrant. She was from Dubai. She was from a Lebanese family. She and her were having the same exact experiences. We just had different outcomes. So, for example, she lost all her sleep. She wouldn't eat at all. She lost all her sleep. Me, I had the opposite effect. I was eating twice as much and I was sleeping twice as much. If I couldn't get through a problem, I'd be like, you know what, I'll take a nap and then I'll wake up and do it. If she wasn't getting through a problem, like if she was math ki koi problem nahi ho rahi thi, she'd be like, you know, I'm going to go outside and take a smoke break. I can't do this. She would get even more worked up.
You were like falling in depression.
Yes, both of us were falling in depression. They're overeating, oversleeping, undersleeping, undereating. They're all symptoms of depression. So
and this is a very general with new immigrants or visa students.
It's very common. It's very common because you're trying to get used to a lot of things at the same time. And it's overwhelming. And there's no one to tell you, okay, you know what? You're going through something right now. It's going to get better in 2 months. Abhi tough
summer will come and you can wear your kursas again.
Exactly. Yeah, summer will come and you can wear your kursas as much as you want. Nobody's there to tell you that, you know. And I think in the first year, as an immigrant, you need that assurance. You need other immigrants to tell you, you know, this is the hardest it's ever going to get. After that, it's all easy. Your next winter, you're going to be a boss. You know, you're going to have your winter shoes. You're going to have your winter jacket. I didn't know what winter shoes were. I didn't know that you have to get a winter jacket. You know, I brought a jacket with me that I found in Pakistan. Doesn't work here.
It seems like there's a lack of preparation for the students who are coming from Pakistan or any other country. So there should be a program, or these universities should be more responsible when they're actually, giving you guys admission. They kind of give you this outlet that, you know what, you're coming to Canada, this is what Canada is all about. It's going to be cold, it's going to be hot. That's what you're going to go through.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And that's two parts. So the first thing I'd like to say is absolutely, I think it should be university's responsibility because international students take up to about around a third of any university in terms of people, in terms of finances, right? So there's 50,000 university students, international students coming in every quarter, right? So that's a lot of international students going to all universities in Canada. So yes, I think that preparation should be coming from universities. I also think that material should be coming from new immigrants themselves. Because when I would talk to my dorm room counselor, they'd be like, yeah, it's part of your, you know, she was, bless her, she's such a nice lady, but she was Caucasian. She couldn't relate to me as an immigrant. She could relate to me as a new student. And every new student, they deal with these crises. Every new student has
some ethnicity, your ethnic organization, ethnicity specific organization, कि अगर पाकिस्तानी हैं या Indians हैं या Polish हैं, so they should have their own group of people.
Yes, and I think they should reach out to the international students because
so how does the PSA work? I believe they all is it all fun and party or do they even do
any
real job?
You know, I'm not really. I was never involved with the PSA, so I can't speak for them. I don't know if there's already a program there in place for international students. I can only tell you from my own experience. I didn't know about the PSA until a few years into university.
Oh wow, so pretty much you're done in a few years.
Yeah, and I wish I knew about them sooner because it seemed like, you know, what it was a huge organization with a lot of star power and a lot of horsepower, but I don't know from a policy perspective if they were or if they are, because I've been out of university for 6 years now. So I don't know if they've put something in place, a correction in place for those international students, because there certainly is a market.
How about Pakistan consulate? Are they in a hand with you guys at all when the immigrants come in or when the visa
No.
students come in? Is there any connection at all?
I didn't even know where the consulate was until I had to get my passport renewed,
Right.
which is, there is certainly room for improvement, I would think.
How about the local Pakistani community here?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any connection between the visa students who are coming in? Are they connected somehow? Because we have like infinite amount of Eid Bazaars and Melas and
Yeah.
14 August and all
Yeah.
those. So when you're saying you're here and you're homesick,
Yeah.
do you get to become part of all these here, or you don't even know they're existing and
I
they're
didn't
happening?
even know how big Pakistani community was until I moved to Mississauga after I got married.
Mississauga is mini Pakistan.
Yeah. I didn't know that. I was in shock. Like I went to Gerard once and I honestly didn't know how many Pakistanis were here.
Right.
As an international student,
Okay.
I knew there were Pakistanis here. I knew there was a
Right.
huge Desi community. I just didn't know how to approach them. And I
Right.
didn't have the resources.
Right.
You know, like I lived in Toronto, but for me to get to Gerard Street was 2 buses. I'm not going to spend $7, to go to Gerard Street to feel better.
Right.
So now that
You feel better with $7 in your pocket.
yeah, that's like a good lunch for me tomorrow. I'm
Exactly.
not going to spend, maybe if it's Eid, I'll go.
Right, right.
But otherwise, no. For me, it's a calculation. It's a simple math thing. I'm not going to,
Right.
So now what I
So
do
you're like
is,
literally in a survival mode.
yeah.
It's just a survival of fittest.
And I think that's for all immigrants, and any new immigrants who come here, they do save up, but not a lot of people realize how quickly that money goes.
Right.
Even for my book, the first half of the book is my own experience. It's a case study for how international students are going to deal with their emotions and with their finances, with culture shock, because I like to think I had interesting experiences.
So you have actually described the problems, or you actually have few solutions in this book as
Yeah.
well?
For example, I had a hairline fracture when I was working at university, and I had a workplace injury, and I didn't know what to do. I went to the university health office. They're like, you need to go get your. In my international student mind, I didn't realize that I didn't have to spend any money to go anywhere.
Okay.
I waited till my university was open. I could go to the university doctor because I didn't know how the health insurance system worked.
Right.
I didn't know how claims worked.
Right.
Right? So I've outlined that in the book. Then I got an unfair ticket on the train once.
Okay.
Right? I was unfairly
Did you get a ticket on a train?
I did.
Okay.
I was unfairly treated on the train, and I contested that ticket. I was so scared because
What was the ticket about?
she gave me a wrongful ticket for not having a pass. I wasn't going with a valid pass, but it
Right.
was a valid pass. But she mentioned that because I was a new immigrant, I didn't know how this worked, and she could stop the train and have me off the train, which is really demeaning. So in my mind, I already knew. I said, she's not being fair to me. She's not even letting me talk.
Right.
But that's a one-off incident, right? Which I treated as a one-off incident.
Right.
And I as soon as she gave me the ticket, I flipped it over and it said, if you contest this ticket, this is what you need to do. This is where you need to go. And I went to the office. I put my claims in. I said, I'm not going to pay for this ticket.
Right.
It was a wrongful ticket. Here's my proof of payment. Here's my ID. I was traveling with a valid pass. She gave me a wrong ticket.
Right. So what was the reason she was being harsh on you?
She told me that I didn't have a student pass.
Okay.
But I did have a student pass, and I had my student card, which is authorized by the Ministry of Transportation.
Right.
So I think there was a miscommunication, and I couldn't explain it to her properly.
Okay.
And she got upset with me, and when she said that you immigrants, you come here, you don't know how the system works. That's
So
when
there
I got
was this
upset.
factor in
Yes,
there. So you
yeah.
immigrants come here and you don't know
She
what you're
mentioned that, yeah, and
Okay.
and I was tearful because nobody had talked to me like that
Right.
in my entire year of being in Canada.
Right.
But that just goes to show that Canada also has corrections in place. So, for
Exactly.
example, when I flipped the ticket around and I saw that I could contest it, I went, I contested the ticket. They gave me a court date for a month later or 2 months later. I went in, I told them my story. They threw the case out of the court. They're like, yeah, you were wrongfully,
Right.
it was a wrong ticket. So the idea of putting that story in there is that there are going to be difficult times. Know your rights and know that Canada will safeguard those rights to the end.
Absolutely, they do. We take pride in that.
Absolutely,
in Canada,
yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
We take pride in that because to us, Charter of Rights and Freedom, there's nothing above and beyond that. And
Absolutely.
we all abide by that. And there has been many precedents in Canada that, wherever it happens, that it always supersedes any other issues. And same as you're saying right now. So what else does books talk about?
So the first half, like I said, is my experience. The second half is a collection of stories from other immigrants from different walks of life.
All right.
It's split into 3 parts. So the first part is other international students.
All right.
Their experiences. So I interviewed someone who went to Vancouver, what his experience was when he landed there. He was also very political, and it was more a journey of political awakening for him. You know, he is originally from Sindh, so for him to make that journey into Canada and to read about Voltaire and Marx and you know all these things, it was an intellectual journey.
Right.
But him again, he went through those stages of culture shock.
Right.
You know, oh my God, I love this place. Oh my God, I don't like this place.
Right.
And then you get used to the adjustment, and then
But I think this should be eminent when we are leaving one country and going to the other country, that, you know, these things will happen. We'll face different situations.
Yeah.
You know, different things will happen.
Yeah.
And what do you think, what was the reason you were not ready for them when you came here?
I think part of it is naive. I was 18 when I came here.
You were too young.
I was too young. I think I was, my world was, I looked at the world through rose-colored glasses.
Right.
Everything was lovely. Everything was rosy. You know, I wasn't going to the US, so I was really happy, because part of the reason I didn't go to the US was in a post 9/11 world, you really got to look at the realities.
Right.
You know, so for me to come to Canada, I was like, okay, I'm in this really great country, and the people are so nice, and there's maple syrup here. You know, like silly stuff, which isn't important. I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about the difficulties of life that I was eventually gonna be facing.
Right.
You know, so I think part of it is there. But I think for and then the second part of the book is where I interview professional immigrants. So immigrants who came here when they switched jobs, or when they took their entire families and they moved here.
Right.
So they were a lot more prepared.
Right.
So they were a lot more prepared.
They were more mature.
They were more mature.
Right.
They knew exactly what they were walking into.
Right.
Right. And a lot of them knew that they would have to work hard, but they weren't fully prepared that they would have. So they would have to go from where they were to right at the bottom.
Right.
A lot of immigrants, they think, you know, if I'm over here, I'll maybe go here. Right? I'll find a job in my field.
Right.
They don't realize that sometimes you have to start volunteering.
Right.
You have to start with an unpaid job.
Right.
You have to start cleaning bathrooms in McDonald's.
Right.
It's just the reality.
Right.
And I think that's the adjustment that a lot of new immigrants maybe don't come with. Like my mom, I can give you my example for my mother. My mother was an award-winning journalist in her country, right? When she came here, she went back to school, because I told her, you're not going to find a job in journalism here. Your university degrees aren't going to be attested. You're going to have to go back to school. She went back to school. She was still unable to find work.
Okay.
You know, and at that age, you don't want to be unemployed for so long, because it takes a hit on your psyche. You know, you've been busy, you've been successful for so long, and then all of a sudden you're in a new country and you find yourself not being useful.
Right.
You know, and that's a struggle for a lot of immigrants.
So what is your advice? Like, you know, you've been through all that. How did you get out of it?
How did I
What
get out of
helped
it?
you get out of all this?
I think...
Because the biggest trauma, I think, was emotional trauma, the
emotional
psyche trauma.
So towards December, my roommate and I went to our psychology professor.
Okay.
Because we both knew by that time there was a problem. We would start talking. We would start, you know, talking about a show. 20 minutes later, we'd both be crying over something stupid. You know, did you see that girl? Her puppy was so cute, and we would both start crying. And we knew that wasn't normal. You can have a conversation without getting upset or without getting, you know, anxious. You shouldn't be sleeping all that many hours, or you should be sleeping more.
Were your parents aware of it?
Oh, yeah, they were. But, you know, they're so far away. They've already invested in your education. What can they say other than, "Acha, tum wapas aa jao," right?
And that you don't want to do that
I didn't want to do that. I came from, you know, and this education for me was a very important step for my family.
Right.
My brother and my dad had started investing for our future education the moment we were born. So there was a lot riding on this.
Right.
You know, I know a lot of my friends, for them, they had come here. For them, it was just an education, and they would go back and they would, for me, it would be throwing away my dad's financial planning for the last 18 years.
Wow.
You know,
there was a lot riding on it.
There was a lot riding on it.
And there are many other students like this who come under this pressure.
A lot of students who are on scholarships from smaller towns, they're literally 1 in a million.
Right.
So think about that, you know. For me, I consider myself 1 in a million. In Pakistan's population, there's only so many who go through a secondary education. Among those, there are only like a percentage, like maybe 1%, who are able to afford a foreign education. You literally are 1 in a million.
Who's here?
Who's here?
And you got to take advantage of that.
Exactly, exactly. So by the time December of my first year rolled around, my friend and I went to our professor and we talked about these symptoms. He said, you're both in depression. It's mild depression. It's not caused by season. It's because you guys are international students.
So it's caused by your status.
Yeah, he said, and the best thing you can do is go home for the winter.
Okay.
Go home to your family.
Right.
You need an emotional and a mental reset.
Okay.
Nothing else is going to fix it.
Right.
She was lucky enough to go home because her family could afford it. I couldn't.
All right.
I instead went to Chicago where my relatives were. I spoke to my parents. They said, no, we'll get you a ticket. You go to Chicago, spend winter break with your family. So I went there for Christmas. It was also Eid time because at that time Bakra Eid hoti thi in December. I went, both my chachus live in the US, so they all came to Chicago. That was the turning point for me.
Okay.
And that's what I needed. And that's what I tell all international students. I tell them, you need to go home. It's more necessary than you think.
So do you think it'd be a good idea, so when they budget their 4 years or 3 years,
Absolutely.
they should have some funds reserved in there to go, just to go back home and reset themselves?
Absolutely. If you don't go, even if you can go back in the summer, which is what most students budget for, go back in December. That's what you should absolutely budget for. You are going to need it. Otherwise, what you're going to do is by February, you're going to burn yourself out and then you're going to quit.
Really?
And you're going to go home for good. You're going to be like, you know, this is not for me. This life is not for me. I can't do this anymore. I'm emotionally exhausted. I'm physically exhausted. I'm mentally, financially, I'm exhausted on all ends. This life is not for me. Right? But the reality is it gets better. Once you have that mental reset, you come back refreshed. You come back with the attitude of, you know what? It's not me. It's my process. I'm going through
a process.
I'm going through a difficult, life-altering process. It will get better for me.
I think that's the biggest realization here, that it's not you, it's the process. So the moment you realize that, you know, it has nothing to do with you, whatever the difficulties are coming, it's just a normal process. Everybody goes through it. You become fine that day.
Absolutely. And the example I gave you, you know, I would think in Urdu. Now I think in English because I've been here so long. I speak the language like it's my first language. But you're thinking in Urdu, you're studying material you've never studied in a different system with a different curriculum. You start feeling stupid. Right? You start feeling like you're not good enough. You know, but you are good enough.
It's just a language barrier, nothing else.
Exactly. But you can't admit that to yourself, right? Because what qualified you to be in this university in the first place should be proof enough for you that you are good enough. It's just a difficult process.
Any
that you're going
socializing
through.
mishaps when you come here, making friends, being with friends? How's that life?
I think friends are very important. But I think more importantly, friends from different cultures is even more important. You know, for immigrants and for international students, our natural defense is to be in those in silos of our own identity. Pakistani students will go to Pakistani Student Association. Indian students will go to their Indian Student Association. Korean students will go to Korean students.
But is it where they find comfort because they're missing their family? They find something.
But to stay in that for a long period of time is also detrimental to your development. Right? If your friend circle is only Pakistanis after 4, 5, 6, 7 years in Canada, you're only going to find, you're never going to understand how beautiful Canada is and how much Canada has to offer.
So basically you start at the foundation with your own community and then you move forward.
Absolutely. I think that's
as you
necessary.
learn the language, you learn the jokes, you learn the program.
You know, my rule is, as if you can talk about hockey and basketball, if you know the rules, you can talk to any Canadian, right? If you can understand how important Timbits are to a meeting or to a class, you know, use
you're
that.
Canadian.
You're Canadian. Use that to your advantage. There's so much Canada has to offer.
But and you have to like it too at the same time.
And I think you need to understand that. Yeah, you have to like it, but you need to understand that they're going to accept you as much as you go towards them.
So we got to accept them first before they accept us. So basically in the beginning, we are trying to get accepted by them, but we're not accepting them. How about the baggage coming from back home? Like, does that bother you? Like the social baggage or cultural baggage?
I think...
stimulating into, like, you know, as you said, the doodh patti to coffee. The jokes in Pakistan are different. The socializing is different. The lifestyle is different. Now you're moving into different lifestyle, different people, different jokes, different culture. How do you cope with that?
I think it's a learning process. It's gonna be difficult in the beginning. It's a learning.
We need to
curve.
accept them.
We need to accept
Just
them.
laugh at their jokes if you don't even understand.
Well, you know, understand where they're coming from. Yes, you're absolutely right. The sense of humor is going to be different because you're looking at two complete different lifestyles.
Right.
What you find funny might not be what they find funny.
Exactly.
Similarly, accents, right? When students from subcontinent come here, a lot of them carry their accent like an embarrassing accessory.
Right.
You know, not a lot of people. We feel emotionally stunted by it.
And we were talking about that earlier. That you were saying that especially people coming from South Asia, they feel a bit inferior to others, and the other countries don't. What is that? Tell me about that.
You know, there's a lot of when I came here, and I know a lot of new immigrants. It's an adjustment to pronounce our V's and our W's.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. Urdu mein sirf ek वाव है,
Okay.
which is both V and W.
Exactly.
So we use V and W interchangeably. Wal, right? Instead of wall. In Pakistan, you call everything, you use it interchangeably. So when you come here, your vegetables become vegetables, right? And people find that funny. But they're not laughing at you, they're laughing with you.
Right.
That's what you need to understand. Not everyone is out there to mock you.
Exactly.
And someone from Pakistan, you're always on the defensive, you know.
Why is that?
I don't know. It's just an
Inferiority complex?
I think it is.
Gore log, Gori country.
I think it is. I think so. I think
So we're still not out of the slave mentality here that Gore log, Goro ki country hai.
I think
Canadian people.
Yeah, I think we always consider ourselves a little. I wouldn't say subpar, but there is always that kind of thinking, you know, I have to be dressed up properly, I have to present myself a certain way.
You have to match up to.
You have to match up to a certain expectation, but that expectation isn't there. That's what I'm trying to say.
But that expectation is not in Canada though.
No.
It's something you come up, that's the baggage I'm talking about.
That's exactly
That's the baggage I'm talking about. That's the baggage you bring in because you're already feeling inferior.
Yeah.
That I'm in a country where the Gore log, they speak English.
Yeah.
They do all this.
Like, you know, there was a professor of mine, I would always go to his office hours and I would have questions and I'd be like, but sir, this, but sir, that. He like, why do you call me sir? Just call me Mr. Smith, whatever his name was.
Right.
I'm like, but that's disrespectful. He's like, why is it disrespectful?
Right.
I'm like, in my head, I'm like, मुझे तो अम्मी ने हमेशा कहा था कि, you know, टीचर को हमेशा सर कहते हैं.
Exactly.
Right? अहमियत होती है. हाँ, definitely होनी चाहिए. मगर वो अहमियत और वो respect दिल से निकलनी चाहिए.
Exactly.
You can say it as many times as you want, but you need to understand that you are on an equal footing with this person.
So how do you come up with your fear factor when you come here? You're like a Gora Sahab and they speak English and I'm into this first world coming from the third world country and you're talking about this baggage being inferior. And do you feel the same thing with other people जो दूसरे मुल्कों से students आते हैं or is it specifically South Asian people?
No, I met someone who was from the Netherlands.
Because they're Gore too, right? So I think it's a race complex.
But it shouldn't be because they don't look at us Canadians are so accepting. They will never look at us as inferiors. That's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
It's an internal thing. We need to understand that this is our own baggage. We need to overcome it because nobody else comes to this country thinking, you know, I need to present myself in a certain way. No. They'll be like, I'm paying international student fees. You know, I'm already paying you 3 times what the average student is paying here.
You should be the boss here, but it's not like that.
It's not like that.
There's something inside there which is stopping you from being that person. And how long does it take to get rid of that baggage?
I think it takes a minimum a year.
It takes you a year.
It takes you a year to understand that you are
on equal footing,
just as good as everyone else.
Right.
You know, because you already come here thinking, I have work to do.
Right.
But you don't. The only work you have to do is prepare yourself mentally for the difficult time you're going to have.
Right.
And cut yourself some slack.
Right.
You know? It's almost like I would talk to my parents and they'd be like, you know, देखो बेटा तुम नहीं कर सकती तुम आ जाओ. You know, the correct response would have been, beta, this is going to be tough for you.
Right.
You are more than capable of doing it.
Right.
Right? You are more than capable. It's not for the faint of heart to immigrate to a new country and be a new college student and take up new school subjects. It's not for the faint of heart. So you are badass and you're going to kick ass.
Right. So tell me one thing. So from an immigrant Pakistani girl to becoming a Canadian, what was the process?
I'm still not a Canadian. I'm still a permanent resident.
Well, but at heart.
Yeah.
How about at heart?
Yeah.
Looking at it as a foreign country, looking at, you know, the way they say it was a Canadian way, or a Canadian log, or a Canadian aisa karte hain. to coming from them to us, or we, that you know what, we do
Yeah.
it like this. When did you become Canadian? Are you still Canadian?
I
Have you
consider-
become Canadian yet
I
by
do.
heart yet?
I do. I consider myself Canadian because like I said, I consider Canada a collection of values, a
Right.
collection of identities, a collection of experiences.
Is this home now?
Yes, and yes, absolutely. I'm married. I have a kid. My life is here now.
Right.
You know, so I think the moment I became Canadian, or the moment I started becoming Canadian, was when I started to get involved with Canada. So I loved Model UN when I was in university.
Right.
I represented U of T at the Harvard Model UN. I came back and I got elected to be the Secretary General for the U of T Model UN.
Right.
Which was a big deal because I don't think any international student had ever been elected to be the Secretary General.
Right.
I ran that conference for U of T for 4 days while I was in university. And that's when I felt Canadian.
Right.
You know, that's when I considered myself one of them.
Because you start giving.
I started giving back.
You start contributing to it.
Yes, and I started integrating myself into Canadian identity.
So unless we start giving back to where we are, I don't
Yeah.
think we can really adopt the country.
No, and
We need
I
to
think,
contribute.
Yes, and I think part of that challenge is understanding that there is life, and there is a community outside your own community that you need to engage with.
Right. And be as one community.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's interesting. So again, how did you come over all this? Like when coming as a Pakistani immigrant, facing all these problems, what would you advise to other students or people that, you know what, this was my biggest strength? Because as I'm hearing from you, what I'm getting out right now is that Canada really did not present you with any challenge at all. Whatever you had, you brought it with you. You had your baggage with you saying that, you know what, you're feeling inferior.
Yeah.
Nobody made you feel inferior,
Yeah.
When you came here, you were not prepared enough.
Yeah.
You were young.
Yeah.
So everything was here.
Yeah.
But it was like, you know, when people create their own monsters and they get scared of it, right? So that's what I'm getting out of it. That, you know, when you look at the dark, you're like, I believe there's a monster there. And then you're creating this monster, right? And then you get afraid of it. That's what you did.
Yeah. Well, I think yes and no. Yes, because part of the challenge is, as a new immigrant, I wasn't informed enough of how
You weren't,
difficult
right.
how difficult immigration in itself would be.
And the onus goes on you and the university.
Yeah,
both.
yeah.
Right.
And also, like I mentioned
Immigration
with
to some part, I guess,
Yeah.
when they're letting you come into their country.
the example I gave you with the ticket,
Right.
right? Now that was something that was avoidable, right? And if I didn't contest that ticket, I'd still have paid $500 for unreasonable.
Wow, it's
ticket.
$500.
It was something of that sort.
Oh, wow.
It was ridiculously high. The punishment didn't merit the crime. That's what I
Okay,
mean.
right.
And the crime, because it was non-existent, it was a really unfair ticket.
Right.
Similarly, there are real challenges, right? So for the professional immigrants,
Right.
when they come here, they're faced with the fact that, you know what, my previous qualifications, my previous life does not matter.
Right.
I'm going to have to start from scratch.
Exactly.
And that's a real challenge for Canada. There has been some work that's done on that field.
But for as students, you're building upon what you learned before. Isn't that how it is? Or it's
For
totally
international students, once you graduate, yes, it's a lot easier for you.
No, but
because
when
you're
you,
armed
let's say,
with the-
join here in the first year, so are you really building upon what you learned back home, or you're just starting from scratch here as well? You're like,
I think the foundation is there, but the way that we learn, the way that we go to classes, the learning is very different.
Right.
So you spent, 18 years in a system that's taught you that's trained your brain to
Right.
study in a specific way.
Right.
You have to unlearn all of that and relearn again.
relearn everything again
I know a
while
lot of
keeping your grades high.
Correct. A lot of my friends who went to England didn't have the similar kind of challenge.
Okay.
Because it was the same type of learning. It was
Right.
it was jumping off of the OA levels, then you go to your 3-year university. It's a similar type of studying. It's a similar type of system and
System
a
there.
process. So that's one easier thing for my friends who went to the British schooling system.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's part of the process.
So what's needed to fix here? Okay, there's one point. Okay, you've been through all this, a lot of emotional trauma, which is I'm looking at this moment. What needs to be done here? What needs to be done here as a Canadian, as from the universities or Canadian government or Pakistan Council, because we're being Pakistani, we're talking about Pakistanis
Yeah.
right now, or from Pakistani community.
Yeah.
What needs to be done so people like you, when they come to Canada, they don't have to go through this?
I think the first step is understanding that there is a gap. There are international student societies at universities, but they work on a basis where the international student approaches them with the problem,
Right.
and then they'll give you a solution to it.
Right.
I think the issue here for an international student is that they're not confident enough. They don't have the resources to approach the Pakistani consulate in this example, or they don't have the resources to connect with the ground champions at the ground, the community leaders. They don't have that.
Right.
So I think the first step is for the already settled and established community here to build a framework to accommodate the international students.
Right.
It shouldn't be the other way around.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to say.
So we should have some sort of a welcoming program for them.
Something of the sort, yeah. And I know
you were working on something like that.
I was working on something like that,
Right.
but I had some other priorities on my plate that
Right.
I had to move that aside. But I think building on that framework is so important to understand that the students who come here, you have to assume that they don't have the resources. Yes, some may.
Right.
Some may have families here. Some may know how to get to the Pakistani consulate because they're savvy. When I came, there was an Uber. You know, when I came, I had to chart everything manually with buses and trains and look at times. So I think we've come to a point where we can really engage civil society here and make it functioning and make that experience for international students that much better because of where we are in 2017.
If we say what is the most important thing international students need when they come here, so it would help them in their journey?
Emotional support.
Emotional support.
Yeah.
So they need emotional support.
Yeah.
They need family here. So basically,
They need family here. And
And
they
the locals,
absolutely.
if they can, perform or act that role, that's what they need.
They need someone to have a cup of chai with.
That's all. That's all it takes to.
Yes, because
To begin
I
with.
think the biggest uphill struggle is the emotional one.
So that's why if they need a chai, that's why we have this here,
Yeah,
right? From
that's
doodh
why.
patti
Yeah,
to coffee.
yes.
Either have a coffee
Yeah.
or doodh patti, whatever
yeah.
you can have with
Yeah.
them. Sure. So before we quickly wrap up, I just want to ask you briefly. You were talking about the not-for-profit organization. Very interesting thing. So what's the process on that? Just tell me about it a little bit, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, well, I've always loved narratives, and my book is in the form of narratives. So I started doing some research on immigrant narratives here in Canada, and I came across a really spectacular woman who told me that there aren't that many books on women, Canadian women, Indigenous women, and I told her, well, I've been doing my research. There are not that many books on immigrant women and men in Pakistan. In Canada, where I could use to talk to them. She said, let's talk to our local member for parliament. There should be a gender equality week, and there should be the ability for us to put women narratives in schools and colleges and libraries across Canada, because currently there is a shortage. There's no books on Canadian women, children's books especially, on Canadian women, on Indigenous women, on immigrant women. We approached our member for parliament, Sven Spengman, who is the federal MP for Lakeshore, Mississauga Lakeshore, and he said, that's brilliant. I think I'll take it up as a private member's bill. So he presented Gender Equality Week as a private member's bill in the provincial parliament, and it has passed third reading, and it's now in the Senate. So once it goes through the Senate, it'll become law. So we're inshallah going to have a Gender Equality Week.
Thanks to you and your team.
Yes, our organization is the inspiration for that bill. So we're very thrilled to be working with the government on implementing a Gender Equality
Well, it's
Week.
an amazing journey. As I always say that, starting as an immigrant, looking for resources, then actually becoming a resourceful, and now actually providing resources to others. Well, thank you for coming.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
No, it's an honor to have you here. It was very interesting from the day one when we met and we talked about all this. Before we go, I would like you to give any message to whoever you like to maybe to our community, our consulate, the new students coming in, or even people back home. And I would like you to hold your book and show them.
Sure.
What is this book all about? So that's your camera right there.
So this is my book. It's now available on Amazon. It's a self-help guide for international students and for new immigrants. What I'd like to say to international students, because I was one, I always consider myself to be someone who has gone through that journey. I would just like to say this journey is not easy. This journey is difficult, but you need to understand that you are not alone. And it will most definitely, certainly get better. Give Canada a shot. You will be surprised how amazing the response is going to be. Just be prepared to give it your all, and it will certainly get better. It always gets better here.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you for coming in, Zinnia.
No,
Really
thank
appreciate it
you.
once again, and hopefully you'll keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
And I think it's your time to give back, and I'm really
Thank
glad
you.
that you're contributing back to the country and to the community, and you're looking after the people,
It's my pleasure.
your kind of people who've been through what you're going through, and probably who are going to go through, and you're establishing a platform for them.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming in, and thank you viewers for watching us today. As always, we had one of the most interesting guests today, like who've been through all this, and that's what as I was telling her that she was the one who came in looking for resources, and then she became resourceful, and now she is actually providing resources to others. So we need people like this who can not only go through their own hurdles, but actually find a way and solution for themselves, establish something, and then start providing and contributing back to their country. Very proud to have her here, and आप लोगों से सिर्फ यही कहना है कि ये हमारा वो हिस्सा है जिनको हम पीछे छोड़ के आ गए हैं. हम यहाँ पर मौजूद हैं, लेकिन अब ये यहाँ पे आ रहे हैं, और हम सभी एक ज़माने में यहाँ पे इमिग्रेंट रहे हैं, कोई आज, कोई कल, कोई 20 साल पहले, कोई 50 साल पहले, एंड वी कैन ऑल अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट दे गो थ्रू. तो अगर हम चाहते हैं कि हमारी कम्युनिटी यहाँ पे मजबूत हो, क्योंकि इसमें से बहुत सारे ऐसे वीज़ा स्टूडेंट्स हैं जो यहाँ पे रह के हमारी करंट कंट्री कनाडा की खिदमत करेंगे, और इसमें से बहुत सारे ऐसे होंगे जो वापस जाके हमारे बैक होम हमारे मुल्क पाकिस्तान की खिदमत करेंगे. तो इनकी खिदमत करना हमारा फ़र्ज़ बनता है, और हमारी कोशिश ये करनी चाहिए कि जितना हम इनको कम्फ़र्ट दे सकें और जिस तरीके से भी इनके लिए आसानियाँ पैदा कर सकें, हमें करनी चाहिए. और जैसा ज़िनिया ने कहा कि सम टाइम कप ऑफ कॉफ़ी इज़ इनफ to get them through this emotional trauma and emotional drama. So please come forward. हम सबके ही घरों में बच्चे मौजूद हैं जो यूनिवर्सिटीज़ और कॉलेजेस में जा रहे हैं, और हमारे अपने भी इतने रिसोर्सेज हैं. तो अक्सर वी डू दिस इवेंट्स के जी हमने ये फ़लाँ लोगों के लिए इवेंट किया है, हमने ईद का किया है, हमने जो है रेफ्यूजीज़ के लिए किया है. तो मेरे ख्याल से वी शुड हैव सम सॉर्ट ऑफ एन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन एज वेल, या कुछ ऐसे इवेंट्स या कुछ ऐसी चीज़ें जिन पे हम अपने बच्चों का ख्याल रखें. जो हमारे बच्चे पाकिस्तान से यहाँ पे पढ़ने के लिए आ रहे हैं, हम उनको भी इन्वॉल्व करें, इंक्लूड करें, ताकि उनकी एक इमोशनल सपोर्ट हो और उनको वो हम ज़राए प्रोवाइड कर सकें जिनकी उनको ज़रूरत है. बहुत शुक्रिया. थैंक यू फॉर वॉचिंग, एंड स्टे ट्यून टू द नेक्स्ट शो. थैंक यू वेरी मच. अल्लाह हाफ़िज़.
Number 1 multicultural channel. This is TAG TV.